Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the Sun's transit through Virgo, which begins on the 23rd of August and finishes on the 23rd of September at the autumn equinox. And I'll be outlining some of the key themes that this particular transit offers us to learn from, and some of the key aspects that the Sun will form to other planets during the course of the month. Now, before I do that, I just want to clarify that the astrology doesn't control our lives in any way. It merely helps us to understand what kind of spiritual themes and lessons are available to hand at this point in time. It helps us to understand what the energies around us are doing, and it gives us a context to help us understand what's happening around us and potential reasons why certain events are unfolding as they are, and why people may be reacting to certain ways they are at this point in time. But the more we understand who we are, the more easy it is for us to just respond to the energies rather than react. Now, in terms of the Sun's movement into Virgo, the Sun's been in his home sign of Leo, and this is a time where we may be focusing on our creativity or our desire to be more creative, to express ourselves more freely, to engage in more play, and potentially, for romance and connection with other people, and just encouraging creativity as a whole. With the move into Virgo, Virgo is that sign that gives us that desire to grow, to not just settle with the raw product, if you like, or the raw creative impulse. It's to take those creative desires or creative projects that Leo initiates and to really get good at them. It's that desire or motivation to become better than who we are right now. So with Virgo, it kind of has two sides to it. On the one hand, it sees the ideal that we want to strive towards and who we want to become, whilst the other evaluates where we are at the moment, and based on a realistic assessment of where we are at this point in time, we can then use the analytical abilities of Virgo to figure out what is the next practical step we need to take towards the goal we've set for ourselves. And Virgo brings that necessary self-discipline and desire for growth necessary to take the actions that are required. Same with Virgo, it's the practical details and dealing with the necessary nuts and bolts that isn't necessarily the most glamorous aspect of any given project, but if we deal with the more mundane details and the fine details, it allows us to, or enables us to better achieve the goals we set for ourselves. And by having those bases covered and stabilised, it then frees our energy up for more spontaneity and for a greater degree of growth. But one of the key, or probably the key trap of Virgo that we need to be mindful of during the Sun's transit is the trap of perfectionism. This isn't, by perfectionism, I'm not talking about desire for growth. I'm talking about that ego perfectionism, where it's saying that we're not good enough, or we should be this before we even dare try and do something. So it's facing that side of us that has that niggling doubt, or that nagging voice that says you're not good enough, or it questions whether what we're doing is right. And it's that side that makes us think that we have to be perfect before we do something or try something new, when this just keeps us stagnant and keeps us where we are. And the thing is that ego perfectionism drives that inner critic. It fuels it and leads us to undermining our self-worth and undermining our desire for growth through that inner critic that's telling us we're not good enough, and causes us to give up before we've even tried something. So one of the things we may need to acknowledge here is, where do we have a tendency to just give up in the face of any hurdles? Where do we listen too much to the inner critic and end up not doing the very thing that will allow us to grow and become better versions of ourselves? So the way out of this particular pitfall is to make sure that when we are evaluating ourselves and doing that honest self-assessment that's required for us to figure out where we need to make improvements to what we're doing, or where we need to hone our skills, whatever flaws or imperfections that we perceive within ourselves, it's important that we use unconditional self-acceptance and unconditional self-love so that the inner critic isn't fueled by these particular flaws. We embrace the different imperfections that make us human, and through embracing them and accepting them, that we're at this particular point in our journey, it's only through accepting it that we can then take the necessary steps to move on. If we reject it or resist it, then the problem will continue to persist because it's not being addressed properly. So it's learning to embrace any particular flaws or weaknesses we see within ourselves, and through unconditional love and unconditional self-acceptance, we embrace those flaws, and then we identify what are the necessary steps to polish those particular areas so that they become strengths rather than weaknesses. Another key aspect of Virgo is utilised, because with it being so much about self-assessment and self-reflection, Virgo also uses service as an antidote to suffering. It's through acts of service that we avoid navel-gazing, or we avoid that introspective narcissism, because through serving others, service can be an expression of the self. I'm not talking about being subservient or being beneath other people. Service at its highest level is a practical manifestation of love. It's love in action. But another area that we need to deal with, or another core area of Virgo, is developing that humility. It's recognizing that we're not superior to anyone else, and we're not inferior to anyone else. It's having that realistic self-assessment and recognizing that no matter how skillful we are, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're better people than anyone else. Each person has their own unique skills, their own unique gifts, and each person's going through their own problems, if you like, or their own trials and tribulations. It's having that humility to see things more clearly. It's through that unconditional self-love and unconditional self-acceptance we avoid the trap of judgment and tendency to criticise others, because we're no longer judging ourselves and criticising ourselves. So because we have that healthy relationship with self, we don't feel the need to criticise other people or to drag them down or put them down when they're trying to become better versions of themselves. And through honing the specific skills and creative abilities that we have, we can create a service out of them that enables us to help other people, as long as it's done in a way that isn't going to stop the other person from growing. It's giving the practical help when it's needed, and then stepping back once the person's in a position where they can help themselves. So it's the idea of service is it's to help other people to help themselves, rather than helping other people at the expense of their growth. And Virgo also deals with setting boundaries. So, because with Virgo being about service, it's necessary that we set practical boundaries, so we're not wasting time just helping people who don't actually want to help themselves, just want to rely on other people doing all the hard work and just sit on their laurels and not grow. It's reserving that desire to help, or that desire to be of service, for the people who actually need it. It doesn't mean that we don't love the people who just want to sit on their laurels and do nothing, just let everyone else do the hard work themselves. It's just setting the necessary boundaries and setting that tough love required to make it clear that we're not there for other people to just rely on us to do the work and not grow themselves. We're there to help when necessary and take a step back when our help is no longer required. And Virgo also deals with health, particularly physical health and mental health. So the Sun's transit through Virgo gives us this opportunity to evaluate things like our diet, evaluate how much exercise we're getting, evaluate the different routines that we follow on a day-to-day basis, and assessing them closely to see, are they boosting our physical and mental health, or are they actually draining them? Are these habits allowing us to develop a greater degree of order, so that we're not leaving things or leaving unfinished business? It's a time of tying up any loose ends in the day-to-day life, so that so we're not leaving a mess around us that kind of drains our energy because we can sense there's unfinished business, and whilst it remains unfinished, it's utilising some of our energy that we could ideally be using for other things. So Virgo is about establishing a greater degree of order and routine in our lives, and these are routines that should ideally enable us to then pursue bigger projects, because the practical day-to-day stuff is organised and it's boosting our physical health and boosting our mental health, so we're in a better position to help other people. Now, in terms of the transits to other planets during the month, the first major combination is going to be a grand trine between Sun in Virgo versus Uranus retrograde in Taurus and Saturn retrograde in Capricorn. This grand trine brings us an opportunity to stabilise things. We're obviously not that long out of the eclipse season, where many of us may have experienced chaos and a lot of revelations come to surface that may have been uncomfortable, and we've also had the Mercury retrograde in Leo. So this grand trine is like a key opportunity for us to stabilise things. It's exact on the second, it's exact at 2 degrees of the different signs. So this is on Saturday, which will be the 25th. But this particular aspect pattern will be quite stable for about a week or so, either side of the exact aspect on the 25th. And this gives us an opportunity to kind of take stock of situations, to stabilise things, and to allow any self-revelations coming through from Uranus and Taurus about our sense of our individual worth, but also it allows us to see what new resources can we bring up from within ourselves, and then use the Virgo energy to hone and refine it, so we're making the most utilitarian usage of the resources. Well, Saturn retrograde in Capricorn is asking us to be real with ourselves, asking us to make sure that if we truly committed to a goal, then we need to make sure we're cultivating qualities like patience, self-discipline, self-control and perseverance in the face of obstacles, so we don't just give up at the first hurdle. Because Saturn ultimately brings much greater resources at the end of the day, but only if we go through the necessary trials and tests of characters in order to become stronger and more able to tap into our individual potential. So this particular grand trine present for about a fortnight or so, so 7 days either side. And during this time we're going to have the full moon in Pisces on the Sunday, so the day after the exact grand trine formation. So the full moon in Pisces gives us the opportunity to allow unconditional love and allow a certain degree of chaos to come in to sweep away the old, and recognise where we've come to the end of certain roads, where certain aspects of life have come to a natural conclusion, and to let go of them, so that we can then create space for new projects to be pursued. And it's having that willing, because Virgo deals with the physical and mental health, Pisces is the spiritual health. So the full moon gives us an opportunity to look at our health overall and see, have we achieved a sufficient degree of union between body, mind and soul, or body, mind and spirit, depending on how you prefer to look at it. And it's seeing where can we draw more universal love and more universal compassion down, or where can we connect more readily with it, and where can we cultivate it with ourselves. And then through developing these qualities, we then channel them through acts of service. So it's putting feelings of compassion into action, rather than just sitting feeling compassionate but not actually doing anything to help people when they are struggling. So this particular full moon is about the balance of physical, mental and emotional health. But I'll do another video on this in much more detail. We won't go into too much detail now. The next major date would be the 9th. This is when we have the new... So this will be the 9th of September, and we have the new moon in Virgo. This will be opposite Neptune retrograde, and almost exact. So Neptune retrograde itself is exactly opposite the Sun on the 7th. And then 2 days later we have the new moon still opposite Neptune. So this particular period is about allowing that Neptunian energy, that side of us that is more taps into the psychic nature of reality, or sees the more hidden side, or the non-material aspects of things. So it's about connecting with universal love and seeing where do we have attachments that stop us from connecting with it, where do we have addictive tendencies or tendencies towards escapism, and where are we still clinging to illusions that aren't actually helpful for us, but because we're so used to holding on to these out of false sense of comfort, we're restricting our growth or preventing ourselves from recognizing our higher nature, which is love. So it's seeing where do we need to let go of attachments, where do we need to let go of tendencies to maintain illusions or engage in deceit, and let go of these tendencies. Whilst the new moon in Virgo brings about an opportunity for us to see where can we change the daily routines in our lives so that they strengthen our physical and mental health. Where do we need to make changes to our diet so that our diet allows us to be more grounded and healthy and better able to take action and continue to grow? And where do we need to transform that inner critic through self-acceptance in order to become more humble and more able to see people and situations more clearly, and view situations with compassion and understanding rather than judgment. So it's developing that tolerance for difference between people rather than holding a rigid sense of perfectionism and expecting other people to match a standard that we're struggling to meet ourselves. And it's also a time to just look at where do we need to be, where we need to be honest with ourselves, but in a more loving way, and how can we achieve a greater degree of internal balance between body, mind and spirit, because we've got Neptune bringing the spiritual side in from Pisces again, like the full moon as I mentioned before, but the new moon is about seeing how can we harness or transform our raw creative impulses into practical skills, and how can we use these skills to, in acts of service that help other people in practical, pragmatic ways that will help the person without fostering dependency. And then on the 11th, so 2 days after the new moon, we'll have a minor grand trine between Sun in Virgo, Jupiter in Scorpio and Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. So this particular formation allows us to really use a practical assessment of Virgo and delve into the hidden sides of the psyche, or delve into the shadow side of our psyche, i.e. Jupiter in Scorpio, and recognise where we need to let go of old obsessive habits or patterns of thought or behaviour, where deep-seated insecurities and fears need to be released, and where we need to empower ourselves by letting go of the need to control situations and instead recognise where we can create order within our own personal lives through Virgo, but surrender the need to control situations through facing our deepest fears and transforming them again through love and self-acceptance. It's only through doing the transformation within ourselves that our environment will transform. Whilst a trine to Pluto allows us to explore our shadow side and our relationship with power, and it allows us to reflect on where we're not living our truth, where we living behind this public persona, where we may outwardly appear successful, but inwardly we're suffering because we're trying to pursue goals which aren't right for who we are. So it's an opportunity for us to again reflect on whether we're being true to who we are, whether we're being honest with ourselves and honest with the people around us, and whether or not we need to make changes to the goals that we're pursuing, because for whatever reason we fall into the trap of pursuing a goal which may bring us material success but doesn't bring us fulfillment. So we end up feeling like a fraud and have to end up pursuing even more desperate measures to try and feel validated. There's a lot to take on board there, but the main focus for the transit is to have an attitude of personal growth, to see how we can become more humble and loving, and identify where we can convert our own creative potential and creative projects into practical skills which will benefit not only ourselves but can become convert into acts of service for the benefit of other people. So the more that we work on ourselves and the more we empower ourselves through developing healthy habits and a positive self-talk within our minds, so we're not criticising ourselves, we're highlighting or recognising where we have areas of weakness, and then through accepting them and working with those weaknesses, we can convert them into strengths so that we develop a greater degree of internal wholeness and that sense of freedom from fears of impurity, or freedom from the fear of being seen to be imperfect. The fact is, whilst we're in the human condition, imperfection is a natural part of ourselves. The ego can never be perfected because it's an illusion. So the more we just be honest with ourselves and accept ourselves for who we are and love ourselves for who we are, the better able we will be to help ourselves and to help other people to help themselves. And the more we empower ourselves this way, and the more we love and accept ourselves this way, the easier it is to love and accept other people for who they are, where they are at this point in time, rather than having a tendency to judge them because they're not meeting perceived standard. Through it's having that, being honest with ourselves and accepting ourselves for who we are, warts and all, we can then more readily accept and love other people for how they are, and provide an environment for them to grow and transform if they so choose to. We don't force it upon other people, we just create that necessary environment that fosters growth and an ability to transform, but doesn't force other people to grow if they're not ready to do so. So hope this useful guide for the Sun in Virgo. May it be much growth and transformation and a more loving relationship with our own imperfections. Take care and be blessed.